You ever feel like your own home turned into a battlefield and no one's fighting on your side? That was me, not too long ago. I was 26, finally living with a sense of peace and control. I had a small basement apartment in my mom's duplex in Portland. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I paid my rent, I kept to myself, and honestly, I thought I had carved out a life that worked. But then, out of nowhere, everything flipped. No warning, just chaos knocking on my door in the Saguaros. Form of my sister Carmen and her two out-of-control kids. Except I didn't invite them. My mom did, and she didn't even tell me. One day I came home and suddenly I wasn't living in my own space anymore. I was living in the middle of someone else's mess. The noise, the destruction, the absolute lack of boundaries. It all hit me like a train. And to top it off, my rent? Yeah, that shot up too. Temporary, my mom said, just until we get through this rough patch. Only no one was asking me if I was okay with any of it. I was supposed to just swallow it and keep quiet, because family, because sacrifice. And the more I said, this isn't fair, the more I was made to feel like I was the problem, like I was selfish for wanting peace in my own home. But I'm not here to vent. I'm here to tell you what happened, how I went from being walked all over to drawing the hardest line I've ever had to draw. This story isn't about drama for drama's sake. It's about what happens when you finally say, enough. And believe me, it wasn't pretty. Before everything went sideways, my life was calm. Maybe even boring, but in the best way possible. I had my routines. I'd wake up early, make coffee in my little kitchenette, and listen to the rain tapping against the tiny window near the ceiling. The basement wasn't huge, but it had everything I needed. A cozy bed, a little sofa, shelves I'd put up myself. It was private, it was quiet, and it was mine. That kind of independence, it meant a lot to me. I'd gotten used to the rhythm of living alone, even if it was technically under my mom's roof. We had our boundaries. She stayed upstairs, I stayed downstairs. We'd cross paths here and there, usually when she wanted help with the computer, or I'd drop off groceries I picked up on sale. But mostly we kept our space. I paid my rent like clockwork, never missing a month. It gave me this feeling of control over my life, like I was steering my own ship, even if I hadn't sailed too far from shore yet. I didn't go out much. Most nights I cooked for one, streamed shows, maybe read before bed. It wasn't thrilling, but it was peaceful. The kind of life where you know exactly where everything is, and you know no one's going to touch it. I had time to think, to breathe. There was space between me and the noise of the world, and I thought I'd earned that. I thought that as long as I stayed responsible, paid my way, and respected the rules, that space would be mine. I never imagined someone else could just come in and erase it all like it never mattered. But that's exactly what happened. I remember the exact moment everything changed. I walked through the front door, arms full of groceries, and before I even made it down to my place, I heard it. Screaming, thudding, laughter, not my mom. Not the TV. Kids. And not just any kids. My sister Carmen's. My stomach dropped before I even saw them. I knew that sound. Chaos. I got to the bottom of the stairs, and there they were. Carmen, lounging on the couch like she owned the place, and her two kids tearing through my living room, which suddenly didn't feel like mine at all. Toys everywhere. Dishes in the sink that weren't mine. My stuff moved, my space was violated. I stood there, totally stunned, like someone had broken in. But worse, because this was family. So no one was going to call the cops. No one was going to fix it. I asked my mom what was going on, and she said it like it was no big deal. They just need a place for a little while. A little while, no end date, no warning, just surprise, they live here now. And apparently, that meant I didn't get a say. I wasn't asked, I wasn't told. I was just expected to deal with it. Smile, nod, be understanding. Because Carmen had nowhere else to go. I knew my sister. I knew what kind of storm she brought with her. And I knew it wasn't going to blow over anytime soon. But my mom? She acted like it was a temporary thing. Like this wouldn't totally destroy everything I'd built for myself down there. I knew better. But I didn't know just how deep the damage would go, or how much of myself I'd lose before it was over. Just when I thought it couldn't get more absurd, my mom hit me with another surprise. She called me upstairs, sat me down, like we were about to have some heart-to-heart, and said, "I need to raise your rent. Just for a little while." That phrase again. Just for a little while. She said it like she was asking for a small favor. Like it wasn't a big deal. But I wasn't getting a bigger apartment. I wasn't using more water, more electricity, or anything. What I was getting was stress, noise, and no sleep. And now I had to pay more for it? She gave me this whole speech about how Carmen and the kids were going through a tough time. How the grocery bills were higher now, the water bill too. "We all have to pitch in," she said. Except not all of us were pitching in. I was the only one actually paying for anything. Carmen didn't even have a job. She spent most of the day glued to her phone while the kids ran wild. And somehow, I was the one expected to cover the gap. The house changed overnight. It wasn't just the money. It was everything. I couldn't work, couldn't rest. I'd hear screaming at all hours, toys crashing into walls, doors slamming. My shelves got knocked over. My bathroom stuff was constantly moved around. Nothing felt like mine anymore. It was like someone had lit a fire in the middle of my quiet life and just walked away while it burned. I kept thinking, maybe it'll calm down. Maybe this is just the adjustment period. But day after day, it just got worse. And the more I spoke up, the more I felt like I was being unreasonable. Like I was the one disrupting the peace by pointing out that there wasn't any. It didn't take long for the kids to completely take over the house. I'm not just talking about some toys on the floor or the occasional tantrum. I'm talking full-blown mayhem. It felt like every surface in the house had sticky fingerprints. My books, some of which I'd had since college, ended up with torn pages or crayon all over them. One of them flushed a toy down my toilet, and I had to pay to get it unclogged. They were up at all hours, jumping on furniture, screaming for no reason, throwing food. I once walked into the kitchen and found cereal spilled everywhere, milk soaking into the floor, and no one even trying to clean it up. Carmen didn't seem to care. She'd just shrug it off like this was normal. "They're kids," she'd say. As if that explained why I couldn't hear myself think anymore. I started staying later at work just to avoid going home. I'd sit in my car for 20 minutes before going inside, just trying to mentally prepare myself for whatever disaster waited on the other side of the door. And every single time, there was something new. Clothes in the hallway, sticky handprints on the fridge. My food is missing from the fridge. No respect for space, no boundaries, no silence. The worst part? My mom acted like it was all fine, like I was just being uptight. "You'll understand when you have kids," she'd say. But I didn't sign up for this. I didn't have kids. I had a one-bedroom basement apartment that I worked hard to keep clean and quiet. And now it was just noise, mess, and tension. I wasn't just losing sleep. I was losing myself in the middle of a circus I never agreed to join. It started with small things, scratches on my coffee table, scuff marks on the walls, but then it escalated. One day I came home and found my laptop on the floor. It had been on my desk that morning. Now it was covered in juice and barely turned on. No one claimed responsibility. The kids just shrugged, and Carmen didn't even look up from her phone. "You shouldn't leave expensive stuff lying around," she said, like it was my fault for expecting my own space to be respected. My plants, which I'd taken care of for years, were wrecked. Soil dumped everywhere, pots broken. I had a framed photo of my dad, gone now, passed a few years back, and one of the kids used the frame as a toy. It cracked right down the middle. I found it shoved under the couch like trash. I didn't even know what to say. It wasn't just stuff being broken. It was memories. Things that meant something to me, being destroyed right in front of me. And no one cared. The worst was when they got into my clothes. I'd done laundry, left it folded on my bed while I went to make dinner upstairs. When I came back down, half of it was scattered, some of it torn. My favorite sweater had peanut butter smeared across the front. I stood there holding it, heart pounding, and all I could think was, I don't belong here anymore. It wasn't about accidents. It was about the complete lack of respect. No boundaries, no apologies, just constant chaos. I was paying rent to live in a war zone, and the casualties were everything I'd worked to build. My patience was running out, and I could feel myself changing. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Noise became the soundtrack of my life. It didn't matter the time. Early morning, late at night, middle of the day, there was always some kind of chaos erupting upstairs or outside my door. Screaming, crashing, yelling, constant footsteps. I'd put in earbuds, turn on white noise, try anything to get a moment of quiet, but nothing worked. Peace wasn't just rare. It was gone. I used to love my evenings, coming home, kicking off my shoes, maybe reading a book or catching up on a show. But now, I dreaded going home. I'd walk in the door and be instantly on edge. I never knew what I'd find. Water running, kids shrieking, Carmen arguing on the phone at full volume. And every time I asked for a little quiet, just a little respect, I'd get rolled eyes or a sarcastic, "Well, sorry for living." One night I tried to set some boundaries. I asked Carmen if she could keep the kids out of my space, maybe wind things down after 9 p.m. Her response? "They're kids, Maya. They don't have volume settings." And my mom, instead of backing me up, told me I needed to be more patient, that they were just adjusting. But I was the one adjusting. I was the one compromising everything, my sleep, my work, my sanity, just to keep things civil. And no one seemed to notice or care. My space didn't feel like mine anymore. My needs didn't matter. I was a ghost in my own home, just floating around the noise, hoping for a break that never came. And that kind of constant, grinding chaos, it doesn't just annoy you, it invades you. It seeps into every part of your day until you're not even living. You're surviving. Barely. I thought at the very least my mom would have my back. She knew me. She saw how hard I worked, how I stayed out of trouble, paid my rent on time, and kept to myself. I didn't ask for much. So when everything started falling apart, I went to her. I didn't go in angry or accusatory. I just laid it out. How the noise was affecting my job. How my things were getting ruined. How I felt like a stranger in my own home. And she listened. Kind of. She'd nod, give me this soft look and say things like, "I know it's hard," or just be patient. But nothing changed. The next day would be exactly the same, if not worse. I started to feel like I was talking to a wall that was too scared to confront Carmen. I wasn't asking her to kick them out. I just wanted her to acknowledge what was happening. But that never came. The worst part wasn't even the chaos. It was the silence from my mom. The way she'd pretend things weren't happening. The way she'd suddenly get busy whenever I tried to talk seriously. Or worse, guilt trip me. You don't know what it's like to be a single mom with no help. Carmen is family. We have to support each other. As if I hadn't been supporting. As if I wasn't already giving more than I could handle. Every conversation turned into a lecture on empathy, but it never went both ways. No one was asking how I was doing. No one was checking if I was okay. I was tired, exhausted. And every time I tried to speak up, I felt smaller, less visible, like I didn't matter as much as keeping the peace. There's something about seeing your safe space destroyed that just breaks something in you. I came home from work one evening, hoping maybe, just maybe, I'd have one peaceful night. But as soon as I opened the door to my basement, I knew something was wrong. The lights were on, music was blaring, and there was this weird smell like juice and sweat and something burned. My heart started racing. I walked in and just froze. My room looked like it had been hit by a tornado. Clothes everywhere. My bed was covered in food crumbs and sticky juice stains. Someone had gone through my drawers, stuff thrown out, tangled, crumpled. One of the kids had drawn on my wall with markers. Permanent markers. And worst of all, my journal, my private thoughts, was wide open on the floor, pages ripped, like it had been used in some game. I just stood there, staring, not even able to breathe. This wasn't a spill or a mistake. This was someone walking into my sanctuary and tearing it apart. I don't remember yelling. I don't remember crying. I just remember this numb, quiet kind of rage. the kind that sits deep in your chest and doesn't let go. I went upstairs, and there they all were. Carmen, laughing on the phone, the kids bouncing around like nothing happened. I looked at my mom and said, "They were in my room." And she just sighed. They didn't mean any harm. That's when I knew. It wasn't just disrespect anymore. It was an invasion, violation. And the people who were supposed to protect me, they couldn't even see the damage. I went back downstairs and sat on my ruined bed, surrounded by the mess, and knew I couldn't stay. This wasn't home anymore. It was just a place I slept in, and even that felt stolen. After everything that had happened, my stuff broken, my space violated, I figured Carmen would at least acknowledge it, maybe even apologize. But when I confronted her, all I got was a shrug. "They're just kids," she said. "They didn't mean to upset you. No remorse, no responsibility. Just this casual, detached tone, like I was overreacting." She didn't even pause the TV. I was standing there, practically shaking, and she couldn't be bothered to mute her show. That's when it really hit me. She didn't care. Not about my things, not about how I felt, not even about the fact that she and her kids had completely steamrolled my life. She acted like I was the unreasonable one for expecting even basic respect. What made it worse was the way she twisted everything. She told my mom I'd been acting weird, that I'd always been too sensitive, too controlling. Suddenly, I wasn't the person keeping things afloat. I was the villain in her version of events. And my mom, she didn't defend me. She just nodded and told me not to let things get to me so much. There's something really painful about being made out to be the problem when you're just asking for basic decency. Carmen played the victim so well. Poor single mom trying her best, while I was painted as the uptight, selfish one who couldn't share. But I wasn't trying to control anyone. I was just trying to survive the chaos and hold on to what little peace I had left. That was the moment I stopped hoping for change. I knew Carmen wasn't going to take responsibility. I knew my mom wasn't going to step in. If I wanted things to change, I'd have to be the one to do it. I had to start thinking about an exit plan, seriously. That night, I sat in my car for over an hour, engine off, lights out, just staring out the windshield. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, frozen, knowing that I couldn't keep doing this. I was reaching my limit, and the worst part was, no one even noticed. I wasn't angry anymore. I was numb. And when you hit numb, that's when you know it's time to go. I started looking for places in secret. At work, during lunch breaks, scrolling through rental listings on my phone. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell anyone. I felt like if I said it out loud, someone would try to talk me out of it, or worse, guilt me into staying. So I kept it quiet. Every showing I went to, I made up some excuse about errands or a late meeting. I just wanted one place that was mine again. One door I could close and know no one would open without asking. Money was tight, and options were slim. Everything in Portland was either overpriced or already taken. But I didn't care about fancy things. I didn't need views or new appliances. I needed peace. I needed a reset. And after a few weeks, I found it. A small studio, not far from work. It was older, a little rough around the edges, but it felt safe. It felt like an escape. I signed the lease the next day. I packed at night when no one was watching. I told myself I'd come back to explain once I was out. But deep down, I knew that conversation would never go the way I wanted. So I planned quietly, step by step. And for the first time in months, I felt hope. Not happiness, not excitement, just relief. Moving out without telling anyone felt surreal. I'd always imagined leaving home would be a big moment. A graduation, a job offer, a celebration. Not sneaking boxes to my car after midnight, hoping no one saw me. I started with the things that wouldn't be missed. Books, clothes I didn't wear often, toiletries. I wrapped everything in towels to keep the noise down. Every creak of the floor made my heart race. I'd pause and hold my breath at every sound, like I was doing something wrong. I did it over a few nights, just a little at a time. I couldn't risk anyone catching on. The last thing I needed was a guilt trip or some emotional scene that would make me second-guess myself. The studio wasn't even fully furnished yet, but I didn't care. I had a mattress, a few dishes, and the keys. That was enough. That was freedom. The night I left for good, I didn't say goodbye. I left a note for my mom on the kitchen table. Nothing dramatic, just the truth. I told her I'd found another place, that I needed space, that I still loved her, but I couldn't keep living like that. I even added that I hoped she understood, though I wasn't sure she would. And then I walked out the door, got in my car, and didn't look back. Driving to my new place, I felt this mix of sadness and freedom. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. But under all of it, there was this quiet sense of rightness, like I'd finally chosen myself. The first night in my new apartment, I didn't sleep much. I just lay there listening to the silence. No screaming, no stomping, no doors slamming. It felt strange, and it felt like healing. I didn't know what came next, but for once, that uncertainty didn't scare me. It didn't take long for the calls to start. At first, it was just my mom checking in, asking how I was settling in. Then it turned. She mentioned the bills, how everything had gotten more expensive since I left, how Carmen was trying her best, but money was tight. I could hear the buildup, the angle. Then she said it. Maybe you could come back, just for a little while, help out. I was stunned. I hadn't even unpacked all my boxes yet, and already they were asking me to return. Not because they missed me, not because they understood what they'd put me through, but because they needed money. My rent, my stability, my reliability. I was the backup plan, the financial cushion. And they hadn't even let the dust settle before they tried to pull me back in. Carmen even called me once. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. She kept it short, but her message was clear. It'd be easier if you came back. You already know how everything works there. You're good at handling stuff. As if that was a compliment. As if I should feel honored to return and fix the chaos they refused to take responsibility for. I told them no, not gently, not with apologies. I told them I wasn't coming back, that I wasn't responsible for cleaning up a mess I didn't make. My mom cried. She said I was abandoning them, said I'd changed, and she was right. I had. I'd finally stopped letting guilt be the reason I stayed somewhere that was hurting me. I wasn't going to be their fallback anymore. I had to protect my peace, even if that meant protecting it from my own family. And for once, I didn't feel guilty. I felt strong. It was a Saturday morning when she showed up. I hadn't given her my new address. She must have gotten it from the lease paperwork or found some mail. I opened the door, and there she was, standing on my doorstep with tears in her eyes. No call, no text, just her, clutching her purse like she didn't know what to do with her hands. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to hug her. The other part wanted to shut the door. She looked around my small studio like she was seeing a stranger's life. "You've got it nice here," she said softly, then sat down without waiting to be invited. It didn't take long before the real reason for her visit came out. She started talking about the kids, how they missed me, how Carmen was struggling, how things were falling apart without me. Then came the ask. Just for a few months, just until we get on our feet. She wasn't crying out of regret. She was crying because the house was sinking, and I wasn't there to keep it afloat anymore. It hurt. It hurt to see my own mom pleading like that. But what hurt more was knowing that even now, it wasn't really about me. It was about what I could give, about what I could fix. And I couldn't do it anymore. I told her I was sorry, that I loved her, but I wasn't coming back. That I couldn't keep carrying something that was breaking me. She nodded like she understood, but her eyes said something else. Disappointment, maybe. Or confusion. Like she still couldn't believe I meant it. But I did. I had to. Because if I didn't hold my boundary now, I never would. And I was finally learning how. It was late, almost midnight, when my phone rang. At first, I thought it was a spam call, but then I saw the name, Eli. I hadn't heard from the kids since I moved out. I answered, and all I could hear was crying. Maya, he said, voice shaking, I think Jaden's really sick. My heart dropped. He sounded terrified and he was whispering, like he didn't want someone to hear. I grabbed my keys without even thinking. I didn't ask questions. I just drove. When I got there, the house was dark, except for the living room light. The place was a mess, more than usual. Carmen was gone. No note, no message. Just gone. And Jaden was on the couch, pale and sweating, barely responsive. Eli didn't know when Carmen had left or if she was coming back. He just kept pacing in circles, asking what to do. I wrapped Jaden in a blanket and took him straight to the hospital. I didn't stop to think about what this meant or what boundaries I'd drawn. At that moment, they weren't in chaos. They were just scared kids. And I couldn't turn my back on them. Not like this. At the ER, the nurse said we got there just in time. Dehydration, fever, something that could have gotten a lot worse fast. While we waited, Eli sat next to me with his head on my arm, quiet, for once. He didn't say thank you, but he didn't have to. That moment said everything. I wasn't their mother. I wasn't even sure where I fit in anymore. But I knew I was the only adult who showed up when they needed someone most. And for better or worse, that still mattered to me. A lot more than I wanted to admit. And that changed everything. After that night at the hospital, everything changed. I couldn't just walk away again. Carmen still hadn't come back. No calls, no messages, nothing. It was like she vanished and left her kids to figure it out alone. And while part of me wanted to be angry, furious even, another part kicked into something else entirely. I couldn't abandon them, not like she did. I called my job and took a few days off. I stayed at the house, slept on the couch, made sure the boys had clean clothes and real meals. I helped Eli with homework, took Jaden to a follow-up appointment. I didn't make a big deal out of it. I didn't want to scare them or make them feel like a burden. But I made sure they knew they weren't alone, that someone was still showing up for them. Child Protective Services had to get involved eventually. The hospital flagged the situation, and once CPS stepped in, everything became real in a whole new way. I had to explain everything, why they were left alone, why I was the one stepping in, what I was willing to do. It wasn't easy. It felt like I was being judged, like I was being asked to prove I was qualified to care about these kids. But I answered every question honestly. I showed up. I filed the paperwork. I made it clear I wasn't their parent, but I wasn't a stranger. Either I was family. And even though I couldn't take on everything, I could offer stability. I could offer safety. And for right now, that was enough. It was the first time in a long while that doing the right thing didn't feel like sacrifice. It felt like a choice. A hard one, sure, but one I was finally strong enough to make on my own terms. And that made all the difference. It was a few days after the hospital visit when I called my mom and told her we needed to talk. I didn't want to do it over the phone, so I invited her to my apartment. She hesitated, but she came. When she walked in, she looked around like she didn't recognize my life. I offered her tea, but we both knew this wasn't a casual visit. This was overdue. I sat her down and said everything I'd been holding in. I told her how abandoned I felt, how she watched me drown in that house while lifting Carmen up, how I was always expected to be the strong one, the one who handled things, the one who never needed help. I told her I was done playing that role, that it wasn't love, it was obligation, and it was eating me alive. At first, she didn't say anything, she just stared at the floor. Then she whispered, I didn't know how bad it got. And I said, that's the problem. You didn't want to know. Her eyes filled with tears, and for once she didn't try to argue or deflect. She just sat there and cried. Not for show, not out of guilt, just real, silent pain. I told her I would help the kids, but that was it. I wasn't coming back. I wasn't paying rent to live in chaos. I wasn't cleaning up Carmen's messes. I would not sacrifice my life so everyone else could avoid responsibility. If she wanted to rebuild trust, it had to start with honesty and boundaries. Clear, unshakable boundaries. She nodded slowly, and for the first time, I think she really heard me. Not just as her daughter, but as a person who had been hurt, used, and finally found the strength to say no. And mean it. I knew I had to be clear. No room for misunderstandings or loopholes. So I laid it out. I told my mom, flat out, I wasn't moving back. Not now, not later. That chapter was closed. I wasn't going to let anyone, family or not, pull me back into a situation that drained me. I have a home now, a safe place. And I wasn't giving that up for anyone. I also told her there'd be no more rent money coming from me. That was a hard one to say because for so long I felt like contributing financially was my way of proving I was responsible, that I wasn't a burden. But I realized I'd been paying for peace I never got. I'd been funding a system that didn't protect me. So I stopped. I told her I'd help the kids when I could, in ways that made sense, but I wasn't supporting the household anymore. That wasn't my role, and it never should have been. She didn't argue, not like before. She just nodded slowly, like each word landed heavier than the last. I could tell it hurt, but I could also tell she understood. Or maybe she was finally starting to. I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I was just done pretending things could go back to the way they were, because they couldn't. And honestly, they shouldn't. That house needed change, not a Band-Aid, made of my effort. For the first time, I wasn't asking for permission to protect my peace. I was claiming it. Setting those boundaries wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And saying them out loud, with my voice steady and clear, felt like breathing after holding it in for years. I was choosing myself, not out of spite, but out of survival. And that decision changed everything. Helping the kids was never in question. I couldn't ignore them, not after everything. But I made it clear to my mom and to myself, I was helping them, not stepping back into the chaos. I wasn't rejoining the household. I wasn't taking Carmen's place. I was doing what needed to be done, for them, not for anyone else. I worked with the caseworker from CPS, made sure the boys had what they needed at school, handled doctor visits, and helped set up a routine. It wasn't easy. I had to learn fast how to juggle my job, my life, and their needs without slipping back into old patterns. But I kept my boundary firm. They didn't move in with me. I didn't stay at the old house. I stayed involved, but at a distance that kept me sane. I started picking them up a few evenings a week, brought them to my place for dinner, helped with homework, then dropped them back. I kept it consistent, predictable, something they could rely on. And slowly, I saw the change. Eli stopped flinching at every loud sound. Jaden started smiling more. They weren't fixed. They were still just kids figuring things out, but they weren't alone anymore. I didn't do it because anyone asked me to. I did it because I wanted to, because for the first time, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I wasn't carrying guilt. I was choosing how to help, on my own terms. And that made all the difference. They were the only ones I still felt connected to in that mess. And even though I was healing from the damage the family dynamic had done, to me, I wasn't going to let them grow up thinking neglect was normal. Not if I could help it. Not if I could break the cycle for them. Supporting the kids became part of my routine, but I never let myself get pulled back into the center of it all. I kept my distance, emotionally, physically. I had to. It wasn't about being cold or shutting people out. It was about self-preservation. I could show up for the boys, but I couldn't lose myself again in everyone else's dysfunction. I stayed connected through structure, school drop-offs, weekend meals, check-ins with the caseworker. I was involved, but with limits. I didn't answer every call. I didn't jump in every time something went wrong. I let go of the need to be the fixer. And strangely enough, the kids seemed to thrive with that. They started to settle into the predictability of it all. There was no chaos in my world, and I think they needed to see what that looked like, to understand that calm is possible and safety doesn't have to be temporary. Carmen never came back in any real way. There were a few texts, some vague promises, but no actual effort. And my mom, she tried. She apologized more often. She asked questions. But the damage was there, and I wasn't in a place to fix that yet. Maybe one day, maybe never. And that was okay too. What mattered now was the boundary. I was helping the kids, not raising them. I was guiding them, not absorbing their pain. I had to draw a line between compassion and self-destruction, and holding that line gave me space to heal. I could look at myself in the mirror again and not feel like I was disappearing. They were a part of my life, but not my whole life. And that shift, that saved me. I could finally give without emptying myself. And maybe that's what real support looks like, being steady without being swallowed. Over time, something started to shift with my mom. It wasn't immediate, it wasn't dramatic, but it was real. She started listening more. She stopped defending Carmen every time her name came up. She even admitted one day over coffee that she should have stepped in sooner. That she had leaned too hard on me because she didn't know how to say no to her sister. She said, "I thought I was keeping the peace, but I was just avoiding the truth." That was the first time I heard her really take ownership of anything. No excuses, no, "but you have to understand." Just quiet acknowledgement. And that meant more than any apology could have. It didn't erase what happened, but it helped. It softened something that had gone hard in me for a long time. She began asking questions about the boys, about what they needed, not to fix it all at once, but to be part of their healing. She offered to come with me to a CPS check-in. She started showing up in ways that weren't about guilt or pressure, just presence, honest, humble presence. And slowly she stopped asking me to carry it all and started asking how she could help carry some of it. I don't know if she'll ever fully understand how much damage was done or how long it took me to recover. But I do know she's trying. Not to win me back or to go back to how things were, but to be better. To be a mother who shows up with both love and boundaries. That's all I ever wanted. It's still a work in progress. We're rebuilding slowly. Trust doesn't snap back into place. It gets rebuilt, word by word, action by action. And this time, I'm choosing to stay, on my terms.